Hey, what's up? Silas here. So, in this video, I'm going to be reading this book, 10 Stupid Things Women Do to Mess Up Their Lives by Dr. Laura Schlessinger, who's the author of New York Times' best-selling How Could You Do That? So, last time in this series, I read this book, Leninism, Leninism and Contemporary Problems of the Transition from Capitalism to Socialism by K. Zarodov. So I read the intro and part of the first chapter, and that's a similar thing I'm going to be doing with this book, reading the intro and part of the first chapter. Haven't read it before, shall have my first reading today, and hope my words come out better than they just did at the start there. So with these ones, I'm just going on different topics that I'm interested in. That first one, of course, I'm rather interested in, not of course, but if you've been listening to my channel, if you haven't, I am interested in politics, economics, sociology, just a bunch of different things, trying to understand my place in the world, having traveled around a lot as a kid and not necessarily been able to fit in perfectly, or at least as comfortably as some people seem to fit into this whole group identities. I've always been kind of social butterfly is not really a good term. Social outcast isn't really good either, because people in these different groups have tried to welcome me in, but something about me I just don't really buy into that much. I'm just wondering, why are we doing this? What do you mean by this? How do you? And one of my current main quotes that I've been thinking of is, most of the problems occur because of how people define X rather than what X actually is. So it's like, I think this is what socialism is, so we need socialism because we think these are the problems. And then both of us are sitting there thinking, okay, we kind of agree on the problem that the government is doing X, Y, Z, and the people don't have access to resources. But then the solution, what you're saying is a solution, seems to be what I think is the problem. Yet what I'm saying the solution is maybe capitalism or free markets is what you think is the cause of it. So that kind of confusion kind of led me to these different things, and that's why I read that one. Now with this one today, it's of course going to be a lot of issues with feminism that's going on in the West and just the Western influence world, because I'm here in Nairobi, Kenya. You also hear these things coming up. There's something in the government talking about, there's a gender rule that's like 30% of certain positions, cabinet members need to be females, and these female only, women's representatives, this and this. So women's issues is a big thing. United Nations has this entire department for women's issues, and there's these movements, educate the woman, educate the village, and all these things. So there's these issues about how women have been mistreated over the history, how they've just always been looked under, and there needs to be this large social movement to empower women, and that's how you will save the world. And is the way women are treated so negative? Is the way women were taught to behave? I'm taking this away completely from the whole aspect, like look at any culture, any society where you say women are treated in a negative way compared to your society or a positive society, and then you look at the difference between how men are treated in that positive society versus this negative example that you're using, and you'll see the gap is probably larger in most cases. But anyway, so just focusing on just the women's issues themselves, just focusing on feminism themselves, people who have objections to how women are being treated today, things women are being encouraged to do today. Oh, should you be homemakers? Should you be this? Should you be that? Should women be in the workplace? I just saw this horrible tweet, and I probably shouldn't take these people too seriously. It was from Kylie Jenner. She was talking about how I low-key hate these ads by this GoPro company, or some company. It wasn't GoPro. GoPro's a camera, guys, but it's GoPro or something like that. Pogo, something. It's a company that advertises for job placements and things like that. She was like, it's like low-key trying to get me to get a job, and then the company responded on Twitter, was like, sorry, not everyone can just make money by going on Instagram and getting deals but for money. So anyway, that's just people talking about how the female gender roles are oppressive to females today versus how we need to go back to traditionalism, how traditionalism has actually been limiting females. So I think this will be kind of interesting to read and see what were the things people were being told. When is this book written? This is 1995. So this is almost 25 years ago. That's pretty great. So yeah, let's see what people were being told. Almost not 25. 25? Am I doing my math right? My math is horrible. Yeah, it is almost 25. Wow, I'm old. It's like 98, 2000. Oh man. Anyway, so I'm going to start with I'm going to give you guys, because I'm going to be giving some commentary as we go through. I'll try to just read it through, maybe pause after the after the introduction and give some thoughts, and then continue with the actual reading. But I personally do have a general mistrust for feminism, and that doesn't mean I hate women. Let's just get that out. I actually do it because I really like women. Men and women are different. We are sexually dimorphic species. If everything was good for the goose was good for the gander, then we'd all just be geese. But no, we're different. Part of the differences are the things that I like. I love this complementary whole situation that we have here. It works so well. Embrace it. Enjoy it. Elucidate it and find those differences and find your better half, and then you will be the better half of that person, and all these other things that people say of this. But one of the people that I am just amazed by and who's helped me be the person I am today, part of the start of it was Ayn Rand. And I was talking to a friend of mine about different things, and this came up. One of my favorite quotes of all time is Ayn Rand's, how there are no contradictions. If you find yourself facing a contradiction, or if you find yourself... That's my favorite quote, and I can't even say it right. My words are betraying me before I even read this. So there are no contradictions. If you find yourself facing contradiction, check your premises, and you'll find one or more of them is wrong. So that's just one of my favorite ones. That's paraphrased. It's from, it was in, what's it called? How am I forgetting this? It was in Atlas Shrugged. But anyway, so my friend shared with me this other quote. Let me read it to you. If in the course of philosophical detection, you find yourself at times stopped by the indignantly bewildered question, how could anyone arrive at such nonsense? You will begin to understand it when you discover that evil philosophies are systems of rationalization. So this is from Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand. So this made me think about someone like Ayn Rand, how if feminism truly was a movement about highlighting how important women were, how valuable women could be outside of our biologically traditional roles, our biologically organized traditional roles that were developed from our evolutionary environment, like women are better, they breastfeeding, they can share more of a connection with the kid, so that kind of bonding, so the things are built like that. Men are out there like protecting the home, risking their body to get resources, etc., then that just extrapolates into the modern society that we have today, things like that. So if people are really focusing on saying, look, there are exceptions to these rules. There are these exceptional women out there that have given so much out of the traditional female roles, then Ayn Rand would have been somebody that the feminist movement would have lionized. But then at the same point, why it's very telling how the feminist movement is something that I had to walk away from, because if the feminist movement could lionize Ayn Rand, then I would be able to buy the feminist movement. I'd probably consider myself a feminist, but I never could, because it was like, what are you guys really about? And then if Ayn Rand was the sort of person that was lionized by these people, she wouldn't be the sort of person that could lead me on this path of knowledge and things like that and things. So women themselves are amazing. There's certain things women do that are very positive. There's certain things that women do that are negative. Certain things men do that are positive. Certain things men do that are negative. Because we're all humans and we have our positives and negatives. But let's see if truly the things that are being taught today or historically have been so negative towards women. So follow me on this journey and just jump into the book right now. So let's go here. 10 Stupid Things. Like Laura Schlessinger. This book originally published in 1994 by Villiard Books, a division of Random House Inc. The little forward in here and the little, I don't know what this thing is called. When they write in the front of the book, I don't know. There's probably a technical name for it that I don't know. But to my husband, Lou Bishop, and my son, Derek, who never stopped telling me I was the little engine that could, with all my love. a nice little message to her family. So she's a homemaker. That shows she's been able to be a doctor. I don't know what she's a doctor in, but she's got a husband, she's got a son, they seem to care for each other, and she's still very successful, New York Times bestselling. So this is the thing. You don't have to do one, you don't have to do another, but in most cases, when you focus on one or fewer things, you can get better at those fewer things. I know this from experience, part of this whole idea that I also talked about with my moving around and things like that, and not being able to actually buy into one society or one culture or one ideology or one just greater group, is because I also realized that some of these people, if you spent 15 years growing up in one area, then yes, it makes more sense that you'd be able to buy into that culture, to that nationality, to that ideology, or whatever kind of environment that you have there. Now, for me, moving around 5 years in one country, in one continent, 5 years in another continent, 5 years in another continent, that's part of why I haven't been able to really focus so much on that. But I've also been able to focus more on the whole ability of looking at things in different ways or from other points of view because I don't have that. Anyway, so get back into this. So the preface. It ever has been since time began, and ever will be, till time lose breath, that love is a mood, no more, to man, and love is a woman, and love to a woman is life or death. That was by Ella Wheeler Wilcox, 1850 to 1919. My hope is that this book will help both men and women put love and work in a more harmonious balance, hence learn to live together with more joy and meaning. And that's the words from the author, so keep that in mind as you read this, as you hear me read this, and not couch this in some sort of hateful manner. So, if we go to acknowledgments, let me see how many pages acknowledgments are. Let's just go to the intro, let's go to the whole thing, acknowledgments. So I don't have any little people to thank. I have been fortunate to have support, pushes, pulls, and nudges by many people of immense talent, heart, and friendship. I have regrets that I may not have always demonstrated the appreciation that they deserved. I hope in these words, and in my life's actions, I show them all respect, love, and gratitude that they earned. Dr. Bernard Abbott, once chairman of the Department of Biological Studies at USC, gave me my first big break after sending me a pleasant, "Sorry, we don't have any permanent full-time positions available." He responded with great humor to my follow-up call. Like, okay, but might you have some not-so-permanent part-time position? That preceded 5 wonderful years as an assistant professor teaching biology, physiology, and human sexuality. So that's probably what she has a doctorate in. It was the last course that helped me discover my interest in psychotherapy, or it could be that. So thanks then to Dr. Carlfred Broderick, director of the USC Human Relations Center. What makes him remarkable and memorable to me is that he didn't impose ideas. He excavated my mind and heart to have me see and accept and nurture what might be special in me. He was the beginning of my self-confidence. Marcia Laswell, current president of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, was my mentor, teacher, supervisor, and role model. She's a most incredible combination of womanly charm, beauty, decisive wit, and intellect. Her energy is boundless, and her commitment and accomplishments in the field of marriage and family are legendary. Dr. Jim Headstorm, chairman of the graduate program in psychology at Pepperdine, gave me the opportunity to teach, therefore to truly learn my craft. He is a man of heart and integrity and gentle understanding. This little aside here, I've attempted teaching in animation, which is one of my backgrounds, and yeah, once you actually try to teach something, you learn it in a whole different way. Like that whole saying, like those who can't teach, no, I think it's those who can teach. Like if you truly can do something, in most cases you can teach it, like really learn it in different ways. So yeah. Running parallel with my academic and professional growth was my introduction to its practical application, radio, and inevitably this book. This interface belongs to Bill Balance, the pioneer and father of the personal style talk radio. He literally discovered me on the phone and put me on his daily LA radio program once a week. No matter how many times I wanted to quit out of fear or self-doubt, he kept me going. Timeout came when I decided to withdraw from the fray to produce and nurture the next miracle in my life, my son, Derek. When Derek was 3, I got back on the microphone on KWNK, walking distance from my house, thanks to the warmest, mushiest guy, sometimes disguised as a curmudgeon, Manny Cabranes. From that jump start back into professional life, I landed on KFI AM 640 thanks to George Olivia, then program director. I started on Sundays, then weekdays, then weekends, then 6 nights a week till 1 a.m. Until the current program director, David G. Hall, switched me to middays. Just to prove I was a vampire and couldn't be, just to prove I wasn't a vampire and could be out in the sunlight. I owe them both. David is my boss and friend. Only he would know how to balance those so well. Larry Metzer is my radio board operator, dear friend. He helped me keep my book and thoughts organized by producing dubs of significant calls for me to review. While undoing my show, his input during the commercial breaks and news keeps up my spirits and therefore improves my performance. Couldn't have done this without you, Larry. He's also been there when I've had a hurt in my heart. I don't know if I should stop, pause, read the paragraph, come back and do it. That might be a new technique I actually use because I'm really struggling with some of this. Apologies, but thanks for listening. The rest of my on-air team includes Suzanne Watley, news anchor, and Mark Dennis, traffic reports. We've become a great team and great friends. My therapy colleagues for closing in on 2 decades, Dr. Rhonda Markovich and Dr. Judith Friedman, have been there as creative critics and, more important, friends. I finally feel I have friends for life. There are so many times I could not have gotten through without them. My husband, Lou Bishop, requires special attention here. Sometimes I think he's just crazy, but I can't fathom the magnitude of his uninterrupted love, loyalty, faith, friendship, and unrelenting efforts in behalf of my career. And Derek thinks he's just the best daddy going. Suzanne Wickman from Random House just called me one day and said, "You have a book in you, write it." I'd been scared to write a book. Something about the exposure to criticism and judgment, I think. However, her positiveness and enthusiasm got me through the worst of it. Now I can't wait to start on the next. Caroline Fireside, my editor, is a special human being as well as an incredible professional. Before she got started with her red pencil, she listened to hours of tapes and read volumes of my writings to get to know me, my style, my voice, my message. She edited this book honoring all of those, making all the suggestions and improvements that made this a finished product about which I have great pride. Thank you, Caroline. Writing this acknowledgement section has been like counting my blessings. I am blessed. I am grateful. L.C. Schlessinger in 1993. So that's it for the acknowledgements, and let's get into the content. So there's a preface, which those acknowledgements I read. Yeah, I read the preface, the acknowledgements, and the introduction is going to be next. Chapter 1 is stupid attachment. Is a woman just a woo on a man? You typically look to the context of a man to find and define yourself. So I think the way it's written here, I don't know if you can see that. It's the title, and then there's some part in italics, which I think is kind of explaining what that title means. So I'm going to be saying, I'll say in italics or explanation, then I'll say the part where it's in italics. So chapter 2, stupid courtship. I finally found someone I could attach to, and other stupid ideas about dating. So the explanation is, desperate to have a man, you become a beggar, not a chooser in the dating ritual. Number 3, stupid devotion. But I love him, and more stupid romantic stuff. Explanation. You find yourself driven to love, and suffer and succor. Or do you spell that sucker in vain? So, chapter 4. Stupid passion. We're breathing hard. It must mean love. Explanation. You have sex too soon, too romantically, and set yourself up to be burned. Number 5. Stupid cohabitation. The ultimate female self-delusion. Explanation. So stop lying to yourself. You're not living with him because you love him. You're living with him because you hope he'll want you. Chapter 6. Stupid expectations. First you commit to him, then you hate him. Explanation. Using marriage as a quick fix for low or no self-esteem. Chapter 7. Stupid conception. Making babies for the worst reasons. Explanation. Misguidedly using your biology as a jumpstart for love, personal growth, and commitment. Chapter 8. Stupid subjugation. Letting him hurt your babies. Explanation. You and your children are held hostage to your own obsessive need for security and attachment. Chapter 9. Stupid helplessness. I always whine and whimper when I'm angry. Explanation. Too scared and insecure to deal with your rage, you turn it into wimpishness. Chapter 10. Stupid forgiving. I know he's adulterous, addicted, controlling, insensitive, and violent, but other than that... Explanation. You don't know when to break off a no-win relationship, or how not to get involved in the first place. And in the epilogue, the birth of smarts, and then referrals at the end. So it's 10 stupid things, 10 different chapters. It seems like some of these things seem straightforward. These seem to be things that are being said at the same time now. So I don't know if this is going to turn out to be, is this a precursor to the feminist movement? Because some of these things are there, they're saying like, I know, but then you see the thing with feminism, why I'm saying it's so confusing. They have like sex positive feminism where it's like the slut walk and things like that. And then there's the other kind of feminism, which is like swimsuit parts in the what's called Miss America pageant and beauty pageants are sexist. So it's like, should you sleep with people or should you protect it? Should a person not? So it's this mixed bag. But let's get into the book. Let's get into the introduction and see what happens. So here it said, this book is going to be difficult for you to read and maybe even hurtful to you, and you may get angry. There are 10 million exceptions to everything I say. Nonetheless, everything I say is true. So was that a trigger warning? Is it a trigger warning from the past in 1993? I think it was. So here we go. Introduction. This is not a self-help book, but it will help women help themselves. Sound like double talk? Kindly read on. Here's another apparent contradiction. The inspiration for 10 stupid things women do to mess up their lives comes from 2 male sources. The first, engineer on KFI AM 640 Los Angeles call-in radio program, and my father. First, the engineer. After working for me for more than 6 months, 3 hours a night, 5 days a week, Dan Mandis was hearing approximately 25 women per show agonize over some dumb guy. You know, Laura, he told me in an unguarded moment, if you listen to your show long enough, you begin to think women are stupid. In my psychotherapeutic, compassionate, non-judgmental opinion, that comment amounted to heresy. Yet after a while, I began to wonder if there was some truth to it. Yes, we are motivated by unrealistic drives and primal needs related to yearnings for a paradise never visited in childhood. And yes, practicalities sometimes make our choices and directions seem almost too complex to fathom, much less to handle. That's part and parcel of the human condition. But I had to admit that women knowingly do stupid things like using, complaining, whining, anger, depression, anxiety, food, and chemicals to avoid taking active steps to improve their lot. They cop out, they get chicken, they act stupid. An example, one of my callers who was having trouble losing weight claimed that she had looked in every available self-help book for a scenario she could really relate to. She called because she was frustrated she hadn't found it yet. Oh great, in other words, until she finds herself in a book, which I bet will never happen, she has a perfect excuse for doing nothing. And that nothing includes confronting the fact that she is basically lazy. Her goal in life may be to look like a model, which could be foolish and unrealistic in itself, but she's totally unwilling to put in any effort whatsoever to achieve it. Granted, there are no psychiatric diagnostic categories for laziness, immaturity, cowardice, selfishness, and downright stupidity. Even if there were, it wouldn't matter because no one bothers to consider them anymore. Know why? In the age of the victim, nothing is anybody's fault. All of the personality and behavioral traits I just listed have been swept clean away as women, aided and abetted by the torrent of apologetic self-help books, insist on rationalizing their self-destructive behavior by identifying themselves as sick. Codependent, addicted, love too much, scarred by a dysfunctional past, whatever. We've provided ourselves a virtual boutique of new identities designed to enable us to marinate in our weakness. Listen to Dr. Laura. For improvement to happen, these weaknesses need airing and excising. Until you take them on, you are a victim. And you don't have to be a female rocket scientist to figure out who the perpetrator is. Dan the engineer, a man, could tell you in a second. It's you, that's what he meant when he said women seemed stupid. The ultimate stupidity is withholding from yourself the respect you deserve. Bottom line, if you want a higher self-esteem, there's only one, admittedly old-fashioned way to get it. Earn it. On to the second motivation for this book, my father, who once remarked at dinner that men couldn't get away with anything rotten, political, or personal unless women let them. He listed every conceivable transgression: petty robbery, abuse, war, governmental corruption, you name it. According to his argument, the ultimate power of women over men was their sexual acceptance and/or approval. My father loved to bait me, especially at the dinner table, so it must have made his day when I immediately became outraged at the very notion that men would shunt off responsibility for their actions. As with Dan's comment, though, I continued to ponder the possibility that there might be some truth to my father's theory. A woman, I reasoned, is not responsible for a man's choices. She is, however, responsible for her own, which too often entail tolerating some obnoxious male behaviors in order to avoid, for example, loneliness, self-assertiveness, and self-sufficiency. If from the first meeting with an ill-mannered lout, a woman expressed her disdain clearly and confidently, the guy would either shape up or expect to get shipped out. If instead she focuses on her dependency and desperate need for male acceptance, while forgetting about his dependency and craving for approval, and then continues to be sexually receptive, she'll be giving him a strong signal that she condones his behavior. So I have to concede my father had a point. And fortunately, now that he's passed on, this intellectual arm wrestle is history. By the way, I am aware that women psychologists are generally mistrusted by men as male bashers. If any of you guys are sneaking a peek at this book, you can relax. If anything, I am woman bashing. Get ready, women, because I am taking off the gloves and telling you the naked truth. You can take it. You need to hear it. Here goes. Men are not keeping you miserable. You are. If you are unhappy with your man, straighten yourself out and pick better. Put all this low self-esteem stuff in perspective. Life is hard. Only those willing to sustain themselves through self-doubt and difficult periods of pain, loss, even dread, will achieve enhanced self-respect. It's that simple. If you don't want to put in the effort, accept that you've made a decision not to grow. If changing is simply too much trouble, just forget it, and at least give yourself some peace. If you're bent on excusing your inner weakness and passivity by spending decades recovering, go right ahead. It's your life. If you're more interested in helping yourself than in so-called self-help, which means eternally searching for the miracle cure via the latest guru's new cop-out title of the month, then this book is for you. Women, rebel! Don't fall for yet another slick explanation of the pathetic yet understandable motivation for your weak need behavior. My book was written to encourage you to show yourself what you're made of. And when you do, I guarantee you, you'll be impressed. 10 Stupid Things Women Do to Mess Up Their Lives is not about steps, syndromes, or programs. It's not about recovery. It's not a miracle cure for your problems that promises gain without pain. This book is intended to open your eyes, startle you into awareness, and smarten you up. But it will not do the trick for all women. Some of you will resent it, even reject it, because looking in the mirror does not always reflect a pretty picture, and because confronting your own stupidity can really hurt. You may even know I'm right, but still not be consciously ready to take an objective look at yourself. So feel free to hurl the fruit of my labors across the room or call it nasty names or just ignore it. Just please, for your own good, keep it around. Because someday, when things get bad enough and the pain and feelings of helplessness get too acute to bear, you'll go to it. And it will be there for you as you make your most important decision ever, to fight your way out of misery and go take on your life. So that is a strong introduction, and I again, let's say the same thing with the last book last week. I was like, oh, really intriguing, and these books are really well written, and that's the introduction of this book, and that's pretty strong, and I think that's something that could get pretty much everybody interested in this book. I think not pretty much everybody, as she says, there's going to be a lot of people out there, but I think people on I've been involved in listening to things in the manosphere and MGTOW circles and things like that, and I think people in those circles have been saying similar things about their observations of women, how women are kind of their worst enemy and hurting themselves. I've definitely seen something like with the feminist movement, a lot of the things with feminism, like as feminism has increased, women's happiness has gone lower. Now, some of the things in here, like I talked about just jokingly, like the trigger warning at the start, but she's going in here and talking about how, yes, some people will hate this book. Some people will completely dislike this. Some of the things being pointed out here are things that I have heard being told repeatedly, how the simple thing is, if you are in a culture, if you are in a society, and the women accept something, like this is one big example in the African American community in the inner city areas that are very dangerous. Like you look at somewhere like Chicago, there's a few neighborhoods in Chicago where people are getting shot 20 times a week. Now these people who have this hood culture, this ghetto culture, this gangster culture, if the women in those environments were not actually sleeping with these people, those men would stop. They would start acting in a different way. But these men go out there and they have these machismo and this competitiveness and this anger and this violence. And the women, that gets them women, that gets them girls. There's been a massive, just a general insult in society in general. If you want to make a man feel bad, if a man has said something, oh, you probably don't get laid. Oh, you probably don't get enough women. Oh, that's why you're saying this. Because it's an insult. It's already shown how valuable it is to just be able to get access to a female that's willing to have interactions with you, have relations with you. Then it also goes back to this other thing. That one common saying, behind every good man is a good woman. Behind every powerful man, every great man is a great woman. Yes, sure. But also behind every evil man, there's also an evil woman. There's also a bad woman out there who's also reinforcing the bad actions she has. Another thing was in Sopranos. It was a movie, this TV show about this gangsters. The wife is like, oh, I just don't want to know what he does. But she knows. She knows pretty much. Even not knowing, even getting to the point where you know enough to not want to know the full thing means you're already allowing it. Like, yeah, I'm already going to accept that this person is evil. This person is committing these crimes. This is a gangster, is a mobster. But if the gangster and mobster was like never getting women, there wouldn't be that many gangsters and mobsters. That's a basic thing. So anyway, let's get into the first part of the first chapter, which is stupid attachment. Is a woman just a woo on a man? So let me see. There's a couple of pages, different subsections in here. This may be something interesting enough. If you guys are interested enough for this, I shall go back in and read a few excerpts from the first couple of from the first pages of each chapter, because I think it's rather interesting. I'm just going to go with the first 5 sections. There seems to be a couple of subsections in here that I'll just go through. So I'll go through the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Yeah, I'll go at least 5 of them. So let's see how it goes. So, is a woman just a woo on a man? I remember precisely when I knew I had to write this book. It was a few years ago when my husband Lou and I were leaving a screening of Robin Williams' Dead Poets Society. The movie, you may recall, concerns the students and faculty of an exclusive boys' school and is set in the 50s. So, what's the big deal? Not exactly the subject to inspire strong emotions in a 90s woman, yet I found myself deeply upset and equally puzzled because my feelings did seem so way out of proportion to the specific dramatic events of the film. As I struggled to understand my overreaction, I found myself focusing on my anger at the mother of the main student in the film, a sensitive sort whose father refuses to allow him to follow his dream of a career in theater. The boy is to be a doctor, the father froths, and that's that. While the father declaims, the mother just sits in the corner suffering in silence. She watches the complete demoralization of her son, yet does nothing. Before she dutifully follows her husband to his bed, she gently hugs the boy, pats him solemnly on the back, and walks away sadly. The young man uses his father's gun to kill himself. I went absolutely crazy with pain. That a mother could stand by and allow the selfish insensitivity of her husband to destroy her own child absolutely horrified me. By the time my husband and I reached the parking lot, I had worked myself up into a rage at the character's weakness, her cowardice, her subservience. In fact, I held her more responsible for the boy's death than the father. The father was caught up in his competitive macho behavior of using his son for his ego extension. After all, could being a doctor be considered such a bad thing to wish on someone? But the mother knew her son's heart. She knew he had poetry in his heart, which did not need a stethoscope over it. She just would not stand up to her controlling husband. A middle-aged woman who was parked next to us heard me railing and anguishing over the mother's spineless culpability and took it upon herself to calm me down. "Well," she said firmly, "that's just how women were in my days." Her tone actually seemed quite sympathetic toward the servile woman of 40 years ago, and that made me even angrier and sadder. Subheading: Boys yearn for courage and no Chapter 11, while girls yearn for curls and no cellulite. As my husband and I drove home, my mood became even more melancholy as I continued to ruminate. I surprised myself with this next observation. "You know, Lou, Dead Poets Society could not have been written about a girls' school, whether it was set in the 50s or now. It is a movie about ideals and aspirations, about personal discovery by courageous actions, not just by attending adult children of some kind of imperfect parent organization." Let me ask you something. If the movie was set in a girls' prep school, would anybody buy it? Would it make sense? Would it make the point of the author was trying to make? My husband thought about it for a moment. Then he told me, "No, I guess not." Subheading: Are you just a woo 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 on a man? His agreement about the obviousness of this sad truth made me feel tearful, profoundly sad, frustrated, angry, and ashamed both at women and for women. Women as personified by my comforter in the parking lot. Women possibly like your mother or aunt, your teacher or female friends, maybe even like yourself, who use an entire arsenal of excuses to avoid facing the fact that they define themselves and their role in the world exclusively through men. And it almost don't matter what kind of man. More about that later. Much, much, much more. Next subheading. Don't discount the positive aspects of male behavior. In the nearly 15 years I have worked with men and women in private practice and on radio, I am constantly amazed by how myopic women are about life and themselves, and how much they complain about men. I wonder if the absence of complaining about men would eliminate the talk show industry. Most of what you hear on these talk shows is whining about how men are unwilling to commit to women after minutes or millennia of dating. Women seem to like more to whine about problems than to solve them. Men more typically want to solve problems rather than talk on and on about them. Men are being maligned because they are not behaving like women. Talk, 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 whine, whimper, analyze, reanalyze, etc. Ugh. To use a familiar saying, why can't a woman be more like a man is sometimes not such a bad idea. Women are so driven by the desire to exist through men that they miss the positive examples male behavior can offer them as a model. Contrary to much of the feminist cant, there are many things we can learn from men's perspective about life and personal identity. To refuse to learn anything that could prove beneficial to yourself is a working definition of stupid. I sincerely believe that if women studied male lessons in concepts of assertion, courage, destiny, purpose, honor, dreams, endeavor, perseverance, goal orientation, etc., they would have more fulfilling life, pick better men with whom to be intimate, and have better relationships with them. Next subheading. I am Barbie, see my hair grow. Of course, there are already spectacular women out there who were born and or imbued with a strong sense of personal destiny. You may even be one of them. Generally, aspirations and lofty intentions don't dovetail with women's concept of femininity, because the determination to make your life extraordinary is not a typical part of female thinking. To be completely honest, there is no realization of dreams and purpose for either women or men without difficulty, opposition, disappointment, and failure. When the French say, La vie est dure, life is hard, it pertains to everyone who's ever lived, not just womankind. In order to grow, you've got to face the fact that painless change happens only in fairy tales. So stop blaming men or society or anything else for your personal disappointments. Decide to become more meaningful to yourself and to others. Then you can go take on the day, every day of your life. Next subheading. The high price of low female self-esteem. The price of not making a move towards personal specialness has always been and always continues to be too great. Since women do not typically define self-esteem and purpose in terms of personal accomplishment, the ways they have gone about getting some sense of identity, value, and meaning in their lives have been primarily through relationships. That has been disappointing and destructive. In the 1830s, Lord Byron wrote, "For men, love is a thing apart. For women, it's their whole existence." And fortunately, it is still all too true today. Next subheading. We haven't come a long way enough, baby. Whitney Houston was quoted in the Los Angeles Times in November 22nd, 1992. That's 1992, not 1892. As having said, women are supposed to have husbands. We are validated by that, and we validate ourselves today. Even today, on the eve of the 21st century, there are young women for whom the very possibility that there is life separate from attachment to some guy comes as a revelation. Read these amazing words, a Los Angeles Times article on, this is November 2nd, 1993, called The New Rules for Teen Love. Quote, "She never had thought it possible for a girl to spend a Saturday night without a date and still be happy. I grew up thinking that if you're not with some guy, you're nothing. Then last Saturday, I went with Michelle to the movies. I couldn't believe it was fun to go out with the girls." Unquote. A twinkle of hope? Well, perhaps, but a 31-year-old woman who has had affairs with athletes in two sports said this to Time magazine in November 25th, 1991. "For women, many of whom don't have meaningful work, the only way to identify themselves is to say whom they have slept with. A woman who sleeps around is called a whore, but a woman who has slept with Magic Johnson is a woman who has slept with Magic Johnson. It's almost as if it gives her legitimacy. So here it is, nothing new. Identity through attachment to a man perceived as super special. And God help you if that perception changes, because once the star falls from grace, so does a woman's sense of worth. She simply ceases to exist. It's no wonder that so many women get furious with their men for having even reasonable human frailties, and don't stand by their man during the harder times." Mathematics 1. Marriage does not equal self-worth. And now from Santa Clarita, Susan, you are on KFI. The conversation began, and Susan, 29, came on the line by telling me she'd been married for 5.5 months, but still felt an overwhelming sense of insignificance. Her husband, the marital state itself, well, things just hadn't turned out the way she'd imagined. Nothing in my life, she said mournfully, affirms my worth to myself. Think of this. If you bring your own goals and dreams and self-awareness to a marriage, the other person can be a tremendous source of comfort and support when your career or one of your friendships is going through a rough patch. That's true for anything that causes your ego to suffer a blow. And you can and should do the same for your partner. If you bring to the relationship nothing but your neediness, the balance is all off. You become your husband's baby, his perpetual damsel in distress. Though a damsel may be macho assuaging for a while, it is not long before she becomes a constant emotional drain and a total taker. In such a lopsided situation, you're bound to feel lonely, because feelings of self-worth do not come from the mere existence or presence of someone in your life. Counting on that, in fact, just makes the pain of your sense of personal nothingness even worse. Next subheading. Want self-esteem? Get it, the old-fashioned way. Earn it. On this very important subject of self-esteem, social psychologist Carol Tavris makes a valid point when she writes that self-esteem is now a mere shadow of its former self. Once, she claims, it referred to a fundamental sense of self-worth. Today that meaning has narrowed into merely feeling good about oneself. Self-esteem used to rest on the daily acts of effort, care, and accomplishment that are the bedrock of character. Now it rests on air, on being instead of doing. So when women stuck in Susan's depressed, low self-esteem quagmire ask, how can I increase my self-esteem? Can you recommend a book, a seminar, a workshop, a group? Here's my answer. Self-esteem is earned. When you dare to dream, dare to follow that dream, dare to suffer through the pain, sacrifice, self-doubts, and friction from the world, when you show such courage and tenacity, you will genuinely impress yourself, and most important, you will treat yourself accordingly and not settle for less from others, at least not for long. Self-esteem is always forged from your efforts. I still cannot believe the self-defeating moves women take to avoid these efforts. Next subheading. A lousy relationship is never better than no relationship at all. Vanessa, a 27-year-old caller, was furious that her physically and verbally abusive boyfriend had broken off with her to get back with his ex-girlfriend, whom he had also abused. What astonished me was that Vanessa wasn't calling in anger about his abuse. She called because she was angry that he decided to leave. I said to her, with some irony, if you took all that crap, at least he should be giving it only to you. She came back with, I know, and giggled. Vanessa continued, I gave so much away, and my self-acceptance was based on his acceptance of me. I just don't understand why he's done what he's done. Here she had taken all this abuse, hoping this would ensure his undying love and attachment, and it didn't work. What a blow. When I suggested that Vanessa tell me about her goals, to name only one, she couldn't. When I talked to her about hard work and sacrifice as a means of building something special, she dismissed the whole idea by claiming she guessed she was just lazy. I asked her if all this Sturm und Drang of the relationship with this crazy guy was exciting. She giggled again and admitted that it was. The fighting, the making up, the wandering, the pain, it's pretty exciting in a way. Certainly takes up my life. This is what you call a life? Subheading. Don't expect a man to share your all for love attitude. I sincerely hope I helped Vanessa see a little light by chipping away at her denial. I sincerely hope I helped you see a little more clearly too. It just seems such a tragic waste to see young women suffering needlessly by having no independent goals, to observe them acting so stupidly. I can't tell you how many 20-something women I've talked to over the years who are furious with the young men in their lives who don't want to get married just yet because they're working practically full-time, getting their education, and or building their careers. If you're one of these women, take his hint or follow his example. Because as I've said, men do have traits. We'd be smart to adapt. So I'm going to leave it here. The next one is a good life requires gut. Then they ought to be law against romantic entrapment. And so some of these things, I think there's been a give and take. It's been really interesting going back to these older ones because they're talking about a situation here, Whitney Houston, which unfortunately, the late Whitney Houston now, she had a very rough marriage with Bobby Brown, ending with her a daughter also having a rough marriage in her situation. So this whole somebody is defined by being married. The quote here, the quotation here of somebody saying, yeah, if you're using Magic Johnson, the basketball player who was found to be HIV, acute immune deficiency. He was HIV positive. That's having the actual virus. And then AIDS is when the HIV virus turns into AIDS and AIDS only kills a person. But I think he's HIV negative now. So I wonder if that downfall was talking about like, I'm really famous. Like, I slept with this famous guy, Magic Johnson. And it's like, oh, Magic Johnson has HIV. So you have HIV too? That could drop your thing also. And there's a few things in here where some things seem to be leaning towards. And of course over here, Robin Williams, who's also passed away. Great movie though, Dead Poets Society. And so there's a mix of things in here. There's some things I was very tempted to kind of stop and just give a little idea and back and forth or my thoughts on each of these subsections. And I really might actually just have a separate video where I actually do that, read a couple of these and just give some of my thoughts. Because some of these things are things that are being said today. Some of the things are things that the feminist movement, or I think people in the feminist movement, or even people in the MGTOW, men going their own way movement, seem to be coming up with and like, oh, this is a new idea, or this is a new observation, or at least it's being rediscovered in a different way. Where it's just interesting how if something like this book had just been read by more people, maybe we wouldn't be going through these same things. Or something like this book has been read by many people, and then most of the people in the world are not really caught up in these movements, and that's why even people who call themselves feminists, I think it's like 18%. I think that was a test done in like the United Kingdom. I don't know if that's the same in the United States of America. Now that was women. I don't know about the male feminists and things like that. But at the end here, how they're talking about how follow the examples of a man. You know, they're saying like, be a man, like Russell Peters. But they're talking about how the different things like men can and women can learn traits about being a man. But then now people are talking about let's go back to being a traditional woman. Let's go back to the traditional roles because that's what's going to save the West. The breakdown of the traditional family and traditional gender roles is what we need to bring back. We need to bring back Christianity. We need to go back to like the 50s or the 60s or something like that. So with a book like this, from what you guys have read, do you think this is pro-feminism or anti-feminism? Do you think this is pro-traditionalism or anti-traditionalism? Or is this just the process? Was she just kind of tapping into the beginning of the current feminist movement that's going on right now? This whole situation like this, there ought to be a law against romantic entrapment. I've seen something like this be perverted into a situation where they're saying there was some law or something where if you tell a woman that if you lie to a woman in order to get her to sleep with you, it's actually illegal in some cases. I don't know the actual case that goes with that, but let's say you say like, oh yeah, I have this job, I have this amount of money, or this is my car, I have this car at home, and then it turns out you're actually broke. Technically, in some places, that's considered at least to be some form of sexual assault or harassment or things like that. But anyway, just an interesting book here, and there's a lot more I can actually get into this, but I'm going to end that for now here. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I think next reading of actual outright reading something of interest is going to be this thing on genetics of the Jewish peoples, because that's another one of the questions that comes up. I always have questions. This one probably answered something like, what do people think about feminism? What do people think about gender roles? What are the things that were prescribed? This is, as I talked about, 1992, so early 90s, things that were being talked about then. How much different? Was that really an anti-woman time? Was that really the beginning of women's empowerment? Feminist movement, first wave, second wave, third wave. When did the third wave start? But that was at least during the second wave, correct? So why was this book being written at that time? Why was she actually mentioning feminism in this book? But as I talked about the previous reading I did, that was more about the economics. What are people talking about socialism? How are they identifying this? With the next book or the next reading, it's going to be an abstract of this paper, this study on the Jewish genetics, because I always kind of wonder, what are people in more of the politically right circles that I enter sometimes and talk to, some race realists, or the Jewish question when people are wondering like, oh, the Jews did this, and I'm like, wait, aren't the Jews white? Like how like Judaism is a mix. Like there's black Jews, there's Negro Jews, there's Jews in Ethiopia, there's Jews in or when somebody says anti-Semitic is like the Semite people who are in that whole area. So like the Arab people who are in those areas are also Semites, but also the Israelis are Semites. But then you can have like Jews who are actually just as white as anybody else. Like the most of the Jews in Germany during the Holocaust were white. They're just European. So like, what's this whole term? So I just kind of want a better understanding to myself and share with you guys about what the Jews are as a people, like genetically and culturally and things like that. But anyway, let me know what you guys thought about this book. There's a lot in here, as I mentioned. If there's enough interest, I might go in and actually read more, or I might just do it myself. And I might just come back and actually just do more of a breakdown of those sections, because I found them really interesting, and as I talked about, it was really tempted to just go out and talk about it more during it. But no, that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store. You can help me out on Patreon. And if it's any other suggestions of other things to read, be it this book or other things, let me know. Until then, goodbye.